All right, good evening.
Recording in progress.
Calling to order our City Council meeting for the Louisville City Council, Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. Again, we've just finished with a welcome to our new city manager, Diana Langley. And let's take a roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson.
Here.
Councilmember Fahey. Here. Mayor Lay.
Here.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Here.
Councilmember Hefner. Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Kern.
Present.
If you would, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We're at a point in the agenda that we have public comments on items not on the agenda or items on our consent agenda. Anyone who would like to make public comment of one sort or another, just fill out a card, which is right outside in the hallway, and provide it to our city clerk, who is at the end of the dais, and she'll call your name out. You have 3 minutes to tell us what you're going to tell us. Please say your name and the community that you are from. You don't have to get any more detailed than that. You don't have to say anything more, or you don't have to talk for the full 3 minutes. And if you have somebody else in the audience or somebody online with whom you would like to pool your time, and if they're agreeable, you can talk up to 6 minutes. Again, you don't have to talk the full 6 minutes if you choose not to, but we want to hear what you have to say. So, are there any public comments on items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda?
First up is Don Parcher.
Good evening. Don
Hey.
Louisville. Louisville, 378 Grouse Court, about 11 years now, and granddad to two small boys. My big thing, I want to talk, a lot of this goes to the new city manager, but you've heard me say this before. I'm really concerned about climate change and loss of biodiversity, so I would ask that you do whatever you can to address those issues, and particularly maybe make Louisville a model for other communities and cities in that regard. One of my pet things would be to close the golf course and rewild it. So you can keep that in mind. It may not be popular, but also I just gave you the, I'm afraid that we're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, with all the little things we do, but we need to do some big things like the golf course, I think. I gave you a copy of my Neighbors Connect program, which I'm still working on. I'm really excited about, especially with the national things going on. I think it'll help. And I want to talk about, I know there's the Block Party trailer issue coming up later, but first I'd like to just mention that I'd like to do a block party in May. And looking at the city website, it says you have to submit an application 21 days in advance, which I don't know why it has to be so far in advance. I'd like to look 10 days in advance, look at the weather. So I wonder if we could look at that requirement. And also the website says that event sponsors who hold an event without a permit will not be eligible for a permit for 12 months, but it doesn't say when a permit is required for a block party. So I'd appreciate looking at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Do we have any additional public comments? Okay. Excuse me. Move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any comments? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Council informational comments and committee reports. Yes, Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. I
do have a comment. It's not a committee report, but I just wanted to remind everybody that this coming Saturday at the Louisville Branch Recycling Site, which is off of Empire Road on the north side of the cemetery, Louisville is part of a pretty cool program for a buddy bench. And if everybody drops off specifically number 2 recyclable plastic containers, clean for disposal, if they get enough of them, then that goes into this program and will be donated a buddy bench at one of our schools. And it's a really great thing. I just wanted to see if everybody would be able to show up on Saturday and drop off their recyclables. Number 2. Thank you.
Do you know by chance what number 2 consists of?
Milk jugs, like orange juice containers, things of that nature. So slightly laundry bottles. So it's kind of a heavier duty plastic bottle container, not water bottles. Thank you for asking.
Other comments? I'll say that next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'll be going with a group called the Northwest Mayors and City Council, Mayors and County Commissioners Group, which is a group of folks from a variety of communities located primarily along the Highway 36 corridor. Director Coer is going to be going on that too, and we're going to be doing meeting with various both congressmen and senators from our area to talk about transportation programs of various kinds. In particular, Highway 42 will be on our mind and be subject of some comments, as well as rail, which is going to be, I think, hopefully heating up a little bit. It's going to be a very interesting trip because it's, of course, first time that we will be in front of folks from the new administration. We also are meeting with folks from Congress who are on the committees that have oversight over various transportation programs. So it's likely to be between the delegation from Colorado and the staff from the congressional committees and the folks from the Department of Transportation. It's going to be a pretty action-packed week. So anybody has any questions about that, certainly ask me if, and I'll try to give a report when I come back. So, all right, anybody else? Okay, good. Let's see, city manager's report.
All right, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to council. Everybody has been so welcoming, and I'm really looking forward to being city manager for Louisville. And I want to thank Sama because she prepared a list of items for me to review tonight as part of this portion. The library closure for paint and carpet refresh. So the library is still open for limited services, digital access, and programming such as family and toddler story time at Steinbaugh, weather permitting. The Superior Community Center Library Service is not impacted. We anticipate a 4 to 5 week impact and check the website for updates. This Friday is a Louisville First Friday. Come downtown between 5 to 8 to check out the quilting exhibit at the Louisville Museum from 6 to 8 and the Downtown Business Association's theme of Spring Fling. Don't miss our mobile zoo program at the Louisville Arts Center on Sunday, April 6th at 10 a.m. On April 8th from 6 to 7 p.m., join the Firewise Gardening Workshop #1. Louisville Recovery and Resilience is hosting Friends of Coal Creek, and a native plant expert and landscape designer, Curtis Manning, will be presenting. There will also be a random drawing for 5 plant kits and a Firewise planting template. And then finally, join Coffee with Senior Staff the second Friday of each month and learn about senior programs. So April 11th from 10 to 11 a.m. So thank you.
And again, welcome to Louisville and welcome to being city manager. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you.
All right. Our first item of regular business is ordinance and a resolution. The ordinance is ordinance number 1894, Series 2025, an ordinance authorizing a loan from the Water Utility Fund to the Wastewater Utility Fund for a 3-year term and an initial interest rate of 4.8%. It's on first reading to set public hearing for April 15th, 2025. The second is Resolution Number 23, Series 2025, a resolution setting certain water, wastewater, stormwater, and other fees, rates, and charges for the city of Louisville, Colorado. Let's start with the ordinance. I think all we need to do there is send it on for public hearing, if I'm reading it correctly. So, do we have a motion?
I will move that we pass ordinance number 1894, series 2025.
Second.
Any comment? Okay. Let's see, let's take a roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooperman,
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kern,
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey,
Yes.
Mayor Lay.
Yes. Just so the folks know who might be watching this, the first reading is always just to set the public hearing. It's to let people know that there's going to be a public hearing. And it'll be in 2 weeks. And come and talk about the item if you'd like, or you can send in comments as you wish. But we don't talk about and have any presentation tonight on that. However, on the resolution, we do have a presentation, and that is going to be, I believe, Director Cower, correct?
Correct.
So take it away.
There we go. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kirk Coar, Public Works and Utilities Director. Tonight we'll be talking about your utility rates being proposed for 2025. This is a process that we start every year around June, July, and we work through several meetings with the Finance Committee and the Finance Department, and we dovetail that with the budget process, and then the budget gets approved, and we get to the end of the year, and we see what our actuals are for the year for the utility. We kind of reconcile the actuals with what's happened with the budget. We revisit with the Finance Committee, and then we come before the City Council, and we show the work we've done with Finance Committee and the staff, and we propose rates for what we need to match our expenses with our revenues. And then City Council has an opportunity to weigh in on this to approve it or ask for questions or revisions. And then ultimately that goes to the ratepayers in the form of their monthly bill. And those adjustments will happen at that point in time in May. So that's what we're targeting. We are a little bit behind schedule on this, but on schedule if you guys don't have any revisions. And if there's some revisions, we'll figure that out with you. So just a little recap of 2024. We had a really dry year, and that results in more revenue for the utility on the water side. So the water fund was about 10% over targets by $726,000 for that fund because of that dry weather. It's nothing to celebrate about because previous years we had very wet weather, so we were very behind on revenues. So seasonally, we can be up and down in our overall swing in Colorado as climate impacts us, seems to be around 30 to 40%, so our extremes are getting more. So it's good news that we had dry weather, and that helped us kind of shore up the water fund, but year to year, we just don't know, so we try to stay conservative on a lot of these things. Also, we had a couple different developments take place where they paid tap fees, and the fact that they were connecting to our system through a tap fee, or they were doing a renovation inside to expand a process, and that process was going to use significant amounts of water, and so we negotiated additional water tap fee costs with them, mainly in the form of water rights. So we experienced tap fees that were larger than what we had forecasted, just because this wasn't something on the green development radar, some of these things. The stormwater revenue was a little bit above estimate. This is an area where we think we had some issues with our spreadsheets and forecasting, and there was actually an error in that forecasting. So just full transparency, that looks like it was above, but after doing some QA with finance, we realized according to our budgets, it looks higher, but it's really on track where it should have been. So just so you know, wastewater and stormwater for that matter are not weather dependent. So wastewater bill is developed from your November, December, January, and February monthly averages on water. It essentially is capturing the average of that usage during the winter when you don't have outdoor irrigation, and that's an estimate of what your sewer flows will be. So that's called AWC, or average winter consumption. So wastewater has a flat fee every year and then resets at the end of every year. Stormwater is a flat fee based off a residential lot, or for commercial based off the square footage of impervious area. So once that's set on a parcel, that doesn't necessarily change either. So it's kind of 2024 in a nutshell, and how those different funds are charged. Past and proposed utility rate increases going all the way back to 2016. For 2025, we are recommending 6% for water, 16% for wastewater, and 14% for stormwater. Water is within roughly what we were forecasting, and it is also catching up with several years prior where we did 0 rate increases, where perhaps we should have done 2 or 3%. Reasons we didn't do rate increases at various points in time. In 2019 and 17, we felt we were just in a good position, and we could not do that. So we kind of pushed those boundaries. Then 2020 hit with COVID, and we kept it at 0% to keep ease on the customers. We started to get back to some incremental percentages in 2021. However, then we had the Marshall Fire, and so we've kept our rates at 0% on that water increase, because we did have flexibility and we did burn down some cash, but it kept our community having less of a rate while they were working through the trauma and the recovery of the fire. So that's kind of the story on water. Wastewater, also on each of these funds, and I'll get to this in a minute, there was another dynamic with how we were forecasting turn back, or the amount of money that we were going to put back into the fund each year, and that had a slight impact on some of these things. But with wastewater, there was issues with turn back forecasting, and then also wastewater is a much smaller fund in the amount of money we bring in relative to the cost of the projects. And so with inflation hitting and labor hitting, that fund just took a lot more punishment and was not able to absorb it as much as the water fund was. And then stormwater is a project that also was hit by some inflation for cost updates. And that is a fund that is saving up right now for a large floodplain project. We do these projects with Mile High to mitigate floodplain areas within the city. And so we have one more large project coming up in the 2028 timeframe. And so this project is gradually increasing, or that fund is gradually increasing for that project. When you put all that together, 6, 16, and 14, and you put that on the overall bill, it means there's about another $10 per month charge to the residents, with an average usage of around 9,000 to 10,000 gallons. That's an average that's over the course of a year. Generally in the winter, most households use 4,000 to 5,000 gallons a month. And then depending on how green you like your grass, you might use 10,000, you might use 15, and you might use 30. So that's just variable by customer, but these are averages. And so another $10 a month roughly on a customer's bill, and that averages out to almost 11% increase for the overall bill. This does not include trash costs. This is just the city's water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities. Overview of what we'll dive into, and I'll move quickly on these, is just our financial rate modeling, our approaches to that, debt service, our cash reserves, the turn back I mentioned, and then the capital cash flows, and then finally an interfund loan transfer. And then I'll recap the recommendation on rates. Question everyone loves to ask is where we compare to others. It's a good benchmark. It shouldn't be the only guide, because every water system or every utility is different in the front range, depending on where that utility is, what type of water rights or infrastructure they have. Still a good litmus test. So overall, we have, at the 10,000 gallon average, the lowest utility bill in the region. I often say I wouldn't want to be cheap. I would like to be good and low cost to create value. And I think we have a utility that's in a great place. We try to keep things proactively taken care of, and we create culture and training within our staff, and we have low cost. So we feel like we're delivering a good value for the residents. If you break up that bill and you start to compare it by type of bill, on the water side, again, we are lowest in the area. On the wastewater side, we're in the hunt, so we're in the middle of the pack for Boulder County municipalities, but we are not the lowest, and some of the comps in there are much larger communities like Fort Collins or Westminster, Broomfield, that have economies of scale. And then also the darker lines on Arvada, Denver, and Thornton, those are actually municipalities that send their sewage to the regional wastewater treatment plant in Metro, so they don't even have their own wastewater treatment plant. So again, these things aren't apples to apples, but we try to give you those comparisons. And then on the stormwater side, again, we're staying very competitive for the projects that we're trying to achieve here in Louisville. Follow-up question then, people say, are we business friendly? How do we impact our commercial customers? So on an average 1-inch commercial customer that might use 280,000 gallons per year, this is a very broad average. Commercial can use this much water if it's just an office with one bathroom, or this much water if it happens to be bottling water and selling it at grocery stores. So commercial customers are very variable. But for the average of all of our customers, if you do our math, again, we're providing good value. So our rate modeling and our timelines, as I discussed, we start in June and July in the middle dots that are green on the top of this graph. And we work our way through with the finance committee, and we might talk with the city council in the fall as the budget process is starting to close out and how the rates are modeling with the budget modeling. Then the budget takes its course and gets approved. We take a little bit of a break. We get to year end, we see what our actuals are. We come back to the finance committee, which we just did recently, and then we come before the council. Inserts, if we get approvals, would go out in April to advertise to the customers what the rates are going to be for this year, and then those things go effective in May. So what we look at is what are our revenues? What do we forecast for tap fees, which is a big crystal ball guess because we're betting on developers to possibly build something here, here, or here. And as you know, their timing is very variable, but we make our best guess and we project tap fee revenues. Monthly rates are the bills that come to your house, so we forecast what the monthly bills are gonna be. Then we look at our expenses. We look at all our fixed costs through the budgeting process. So that's all our people and chemicals and power, which is a big cost. And then we look at the capital projects that we need to achieve over time, which is a big variable cost. You put that all together and we try to get that to balance out with targets and goals over the long run. So approaches you can take to rate planning are just in time. So we say like, hey, we know of a big cost coming in 5 years. We're not gonna worry about it. And in 4 years, we'll do a really big rate increase, and that would be a just-in-time approach. Or you can do smoothing, where you know you have a big cost in 5 years, so let's incrementally build our rates up and save up for that big cost in 5 years and smooth out, so it's not just a shock factor. So historically, since 2013, we've modeled things every year, and we've used smoothing over the course of time. Debt service coverage is something that if you borrow money, you have to bring in a certain amount of monthly cash for the banks to feel comfortable to give you the money. So we have to have a certain amount of money coming in compared to the amount of debt service that we have. That's called debt service coverage. And that maintains our credit ratings and allows us to get the loans we utilize for some of our longer term debt financing. Currently, we have a Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority debt that retires in 2035. It's got a 1.1 ratio on it. We have a 2013 revenue bond, and that was something that was refinanced in 13 from 2003, but long story short, that's retiring this year, so that's great. Debt's paid off for a water fund situation. We established in 2013, working with rate consultants, kind of our target debt service coverage ratios, which take into account the requirements of the bank, plus some contingency to make sure we've got some room in there. So those are just different debt service coverage ratios. We evaluate the utility against, so we evaluate both our costs with and without tap fees in the case that, the economy changes and interest rates go up and then development dries up, and then do you have enough with just your monthly bills? So we're constantly doing sensitivity testing to make sure we're covering both our basis for debt and also our basis for cash. Our strategy around debt, and you can't see it, if you go back before 2025, The wastewater and stormwater funds took on debt in 2014 and 15 to build the new wastewater treatment plant that we built, and then also to do a very large floodplain project that took downtown out of the floodplain. At the same time, we had the water debt, and what we looked at is the bottom line on the total of all those debt payments. And we use our debt service coverage ratios in aggregate across all three funds. So our debt service coverages, we analyze by fund, and then we analyze our debt service coverage by all the funds in aggregate. And that allows, when you can look at it with all the funds in aggregate, for the debt service coverage not to drive rate increases as much as you did it individually. So in aggregate, we look at our three funds and we say, what's our total payments? And it's $2.4 million. So if you went back to 2015, when we took on the new debt, the water debt actually was around $2.4 million. And we took on the wastewater and stormwater debt. We went to an interest-only loan until the last few years. So we could keep that total cash flow around 2.5 million and minimize any impact to the residents. So you're seeing the water fund now at zeros, that's paid off. We keep that level 2.4 million, and that's the debt that we pay each year for your wastewater and stormwater funds for that wastewater plant and for that downtown stormwater project. Cash reserve policies for each fund, 90 days cash or 25% of total O&M. That's worked well for a long period of time, but with inflation and the cost of construction going up, that doesn't really leave us quite enough reserves for projects that are fluctuating with cost estimates and whatnot. And so we proposed this year, or last year, and it's being implemented this year, more of a working capital reserves. And so that would include the 25% of the current operating costs, plus we'd have additional 2% of the fixed capital assets values. So we're talking 2% of hundreds of millions of dollars. And so we've added in that working capital reserves, and that has had some impact on the rate increases to build our reserves a little bit. Essentially, you can run things really tight. It's like, and then you're driving down a road and you're driving in a sports car and it feels really tight, but you hit a dirt road with that sports car and you're bouncing all around and nobody likes to ride. So what we're trying to do is just build in a little more conservative approach so we can absorb these bumps in the road. It seems like in this day and age, whether it's a disaster, the economy, or a pandemic, we're experiencing more bumps in the road, weather, seasonal impacts. So we're just trying to plan for that in the long term so that we can minimize surprises for the council and the residents. Turn back policy, you can see in each given year, this is the amount of money that was turned back. You can see that like in 16, 17, 18, and 19, there was some conservative budgeting. We also struggled to keep staffing filled by a significant margin, so we had a lot of surplus that went back into the fund. It just looked like we were over budgeting. And so in the, I think, 23 budget process, the city council said, hey, the utility just needs a plan to give 10% back every year. And they felt like if we did that, we weren't going to have compounding happen on our modeling. And I'll explain a little bit more why that didn't work. One, it didn't work because costs have just exploded on us. So turn back, for the utility at least, has not been something we can reliably do. So when you're automatically assuming you're going to put 10% of your cash back into your fund, and then you just can't regularly do that, then you're already starting your modeling in a 10% hole. So we just said, hey, let's recommend going away from the turn back. Like, it was a good effort, but it hasn't worked well for us. So we talked with the finance committee about getting rid of the turn back. So in all cases, we're moving from the 10% to a 0% turn back. The myth out there is that if we averaged this out over years, we were just compounding all these percentages and arbitrarily making rates higher. You know, in a lot of cities, they might do their rates and model them every 2 to 3 years. Some do it every 5 years. And so their rate forecast might be a little more static than real time. In our case, as a staff, we model our rates pretty much quarterly. And so you're kind of getting real-time modeling each year. So any surpluses or any benefits we received over the year get acknowledged in those models. And if anything, it just brings the rate down for that model year run. So at no point in time are we compounding any percentages longer than 12 months. Everything resets every year. And so again, we're modeling real time, and these aren't built-in compounding effects. So it's a little bit on turn back. You can stop me at any time if you have a fascinating question or you're just curious. Like, I'm rattling through because I want to get you guys out of here. So again, you can see we're projecting the turn back is 0. And we were on the same page with Finance Committee on that, and hope that this presentation makes you all feel comfortable with that approach as well. Wastewater, the other one that was, like I said, it was impacted by inflation and project costs. In our July forecast, we had a large project, $4 to $5 million project, solids handling, that's underway right now. Red Tail was kind of still a dream per se. It wasn't a reality. And so our project had to all go kind of at once. Once Red Tail actually got some feet and some legs, and it's a reality now, coming with Red Tail is a wastewater treatment plant expansion being built and funded by the developer. But because now we're doing a larger expansion, it kind of allows us to do some of our project on the front end and then some of our project kind of in the middle and back end of the wastewater expansion, so we can spread out our cash flow. So that allowed some additional smoothing to take place. Also, as we got the project bid out and tried to value engineer more, we were trying to get more cost efficiency in these different zones. So that helped a little bit. Also, credit to the Finance Committee. We did a lot of brainstorming. We started out in June of last year with so I'm recovering from a cold, so at some point tonight, the voice is gonna fall out and you guys are gonna have to carry the conversation. For now, I'm gonna make it work. We had a lot of brainstorming because when we run our initial raw model run, we give it to the Finance Committee and we say, this is just what the initial run looks like. This isn't the recommendation, but this is what we have to figure ourselves out of or into. And so I think we were in a 30 to 50% range for a wastewater rate increase, which that's a shock factor, right? But we're not alone. Broomfield's been in the news. They've done 50% rate increases. They've gotten hit with similar challenges. But one of the ideas we talked about was doing an interfund loan. The water fund has a high cash reserve right now. That's because we've been saving up for projects. And in a few years, we're gonna burn that down. And so there's not always gonna be a lot there. But for right now, the water fund can loan the wastewater fund some money and minimize those impacts on the wastewater fund. So we call that an interloan condition. And so we've worked with our attorneys to set that up, and that's the ordinance that was discussed earlier. So we're gonna borrow $900,000 from the water fund to the wastewater fund. That'll be paid back over 3 years, roughly a 4.8% interest rate. That's reevaluated every year according to how finance manages our investments. And essentially, we're charging the interest to the wastewater fund equal to the percentage of our investment return as our portfolios are managed. So that's kind of the gist on the loan and why we did that. On the water side, so this is 2024 rates in February. We said, hey, this is what the future looks like. In October, after a lot of brainstorming with the Finance Committee, we said that held pretty true. And so in 2025, once we got actuals, just because of that, some more confidence in some of our numbers in that warm year and those tap fees, we had a little more money come in. So you see like that right now went from 6.5 to 6. You can see the orange line on the graph on the bottom. That's that 90-day operating target cash reserve. And then that gray line that pops up, and you'll see this in the next few graphs as well, is that target operating cash reserve and that working capital reserve. So as you see, we're trying to get our cash up that's sitting in the bank and keep it up so we can absorb bumps in the road. Those bumps in the road might be project costs come way out of whack because of how the economy is working these days, or it was rainy, so we're down 20 or 30% in revenues. So those are the types of things we're trying to capture. Wastewater side graph is similar. Orange line is the operating target, gray line is the working capital reserve. In February, we told you we'd be around 12%. We came to Finance Committee and we had knocked things down with the interfund loan transfers and spreading out those project costs on the wastewater project. And so we were at around 17.5%. And then once we got the actuals in, we're at 16%. So we've got some hefty increases on wastewater for a few years. and then that tails off as we get out of these big project costs, and hopefully things with economy and costs, they were leveling out. Who knows where they're going to go now, but hopefully things ease on the economy impacts to us. Stormwater side, similar conversation. Stormwater's been pretty stable. Stormwater is a much smaller fund that does fewer projects. You might be saying, tell me it's not so, Kurt, in 2030, we're really going to reduce the rates. It's possible. It's a conversation we need to have. This fund has been there for floodplain mitigation projects. And then we also do stormwater maintenance and some stormwater quality projects out of this fund. But as we have completed all of our floodplain mitigation that we can within the city, this fund has less capital intensive things happening. And so these numbers will change. That's pretty far out crystal ball, but we do anticipate less capital need in the long-term future. So that's why that's a negative. Just again, looking at the past and proposed utility rates, just reiterating, we're suggesting 6% for water, 16% for wastewater, and 14% for stormwater. With that, I'll conclude the presentation. I'm happy to dig into details and questions.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks, Kurt. In the debt service, if you want to find the slide that's got that 2 million and 0.4 million over time. Yep. Did you say this expires in 2035? Did I see that in the slide?
Yes, because that wastewater and stormwater lines, those are one loan.
Yeah, and then it matures in 2035.
Yep.
And so, again, you got to stop your dates somewhere.
Yeah.
You don't have, past and you don't have through 2040, but what's the relative impact in like 2036 to our rates if when this goes away, or do you see new loans coming in that'll kind of replace these loans, or what? Yeah, I totally understand 2036 is a long time out, but just trying to understand what that will do to our fees.
In 2036, as status quo sits, based on what we know today, we'll probably have some sort of reduction, we believe. There's a lot of life to live before we get to 2036. And our new plant that was built in 15 will be 20 years old and may have significant reinvestment. It doesn't mean that we need to go out and take out new loans and have debt service coverage, but there may be other capital intensive costs. So like, I couldn't tell you. I would hope it would be less, but I don't want to make any promises. I mean, I wish everything in life was cheaper 10 years from now, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand the order of magnitude of not having to pay $2.4 million a year towards debt service. Are we talking about a reduction of $1, $10, $20? Like what is that? If that went away next year, magic ball, how much money is that per resident?
I don't have that in my head. Usually I'm pretty quick on the draw. Tonight I don't have that number. So I don't know, but we can get that to you.
Okay. And then the smoothing, I appreciate the later slides with, again, more future dates. Because, when I think of smoothing, if you tell me 2025, 16%, that means so is the foreseeable future, right? That's the idea of smoothing, is like, we're going to do the same increase over a long period of time so we don't shock anybody. But 16% seems like the shock, where we're trying to avoid a 16% year. And here we are with a 16% year. But I do want to clarify that it's not a one-year thing. We're going to be 16% this year, next year. Then you have it coming down to 9 and then down to 0. Is it that to me doesn't seem as much like smoothing when we go from like pretty much nothing up to, well, so this doesn't have previous dates, so it's a little hard, but we're like, and I understand the zeros, like, oh, COVID and Marshall Fire, so we tried not to do stuff, and then we're catching up, but it's 0, 0, 5, 7, 16, 16, 9, 0. For me, that's like, that doesn't feel smooth. So is there a reason we are not doing 10% a year for the next 10 years as opposed to 16, 16, 9, 0?
Because of the cash flow that we needed now for the projects we're doing now. So you have
basically, if we only did 10, 2025 would be really rough for the fund balance, or?
There's a couple things going on. We had cash flow coming down and we had the project costs. And we're also trying to build that reserve up so we don't have the surprises. And then we had inflation hitting us at the same time. And then we had that 10% turn back that was hitting us. So we just had all these things all at one time hit. And I think if we would have just had one of those types of things happen, you would have seen significantly different scenarios. But the fact that it all just kind of layered, it was a little bit of a perfect storm on this fund. So if we did do we can spread it out because of the cash flow we need. We don't want to take that cash flow and go negative. So we needed to generate that money up front with the 16s and 16s. Over time, we could try to be more conservative and say, instead of having those zeros there, we could show ones or twos or threes. We could look at those types of things. We do analyze the funds for what are the O&M cost increases needed versus what are the capital cost increases needed. Typically, the O&Ms show that you need 1 or 2% each year. So we could do that. But in the case, if we showed that right now, you're going to see that cash graph grow really strongly. And then that's going to cause other questions. People are going to be like, why are you taking money out of my pocket right now when you don't need it? So we just think this is the best balance. Every year we learn more about future needs, whether it's EPA regulations or something's failing. So I don't know that we ever totally get to zeros. We'll always, again, every year remodel and then spread it out as we can. So honestly, if I had a crystal ball to make it much smoother, I should go be a consultant and, maybe I'll retire sooner. I don't know.
That'd be excellent for everybody.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. I think, one of my concerns from 5-6 years ago, right, and through today is as opposed to some of our other funds, the water fund, various water funds always seem to be pretty flush, lots of money in what I understand, and it's maybe for myself, maybe for the public, but building large reserves because you have these one-time $20 million project, $30 million. So it's when I first came in, why do we have $20 million in the water fund? What are we doing, right? And so what I do understand, there's some really big projects that come at the end of a 20-year or 30-year period, and so we need to plan for that. The alternative, of course, would be to bond for that when it comes, or different ways of doing that. But can you help me understand what happens with Red Tail coming in with a big chunk to do an upgrade? Does that change at all our models on without Red Tail we were going to have to do something soon, but now with Red Tail paying their way and doing their thing, we may not actually need the same upgrades or the same. Is there any effect there with that sort of? We can never guarantee that project was coming, and now that we really believe it's coming, how does that affect the long-term monetary needs for these big fund balances in the near future?
Yeah, Red Tail is built in the future. Number one, it's paying its way as it's being built, through some agreement. So wastewater side, it's paying for that wastewater treatment plant expansion. And then there will be negotiations had. There will be still some wastewater tap fees on certain parcels, possibly. On the water side, there will be impacts to the water system. There's more usage. There'll be capital upgrades for that. They will be paying tap fees as they go on the water side. So those tap fees, to some extent, are forecasted into our budgets and our models. And so we're just saying, hey, we think Red Tail will build X, Y, Z amount in 25, 26, 27, 28. So a lot of big guesses, and it's really built on the success of Red Tail. If Red Tail is not successful, the model looks worse. If Red Tail is successful, they're covering their costs. So that's just kind of the games we're playing right now.
Yeah.
Are the analysis scenarios.
Yeah, no, I'm not looking to change anything tonight. I think you guys have done a lot of good work, and I trust the work of the Finance Committee and all of you. I guess I'm maybe hopeful that we're being pretty conservative on tap fees and use fees because that's our nature, and that if red tail develops and Advent comes in quick order and other, like that this could change in a positive way with more income coming in. Because again, a $500,000 tap fee or $1 million tap fee for a huge development is going to have a pretty big impact. So is it fair to say we're at least being conservative in our projections of what's to come based on like that? Generally, it's been approved, and we expect buildings to be coming. Would you think that we're being pretty conservative in what we're expecting?
I think we're trying to be conservative and realistic at the same time, like it's a blend. And when we say conservative, that would mean we are forecasting less tap fees from
Right.
red tail, and ultimately we would get more.
Right.
Not high. So I think we're trying to get it as close as we can. A lot of this is really big plus or minus percentages.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And like anything that people are like, oh gosh, I wish we would have done this or that differently this year. We're going to pick this process up in June with the finance committee for next year. So by all means, if you're comfortable with tonight, you want to move this forward, great, let's do that. And if you want things you want us to tweak, send us on our way with some ideas, and like we'll bring those to the finance committee, incorporate those things into the modeling for this upcoming season.
So my last question, I promise I'm done, is, I mean, fake numbers for the point of exaggeration, but if we get $50 million of tap fees, does that have a potential of decreasing use fees for all users? Because they seem very separate to me. We have a use fee and a tap fee, but if we just got this enormous quantity of tap fees, would that be able to decrease our user fees or usage fees because just we have so much money? They seem separate, but would they be combinable?
We do combine. There aren't separate funds, but those tap fees are to only be used for growth and capacity factors. Now, those factors of growth and capacity are built on best guesses for a long-term build out, right? So today, that build out, if you look at water usage, has a very wide band of uncertainty. And so as we get tap fees and we have less certain or more certainty and that band closes, we got to go by water rights, or we maybe we're on the edge of, do we need to build another water tank or not? And so as we figure these things out, all those tap fees will ultimately help user fees in the long run. But tap fees aren't being used to make user fees cheaper because they're there for the growth. They're not there to make. There is some stuff that is built that has capacity, so you're just also getting some reimbursement for what you've already built.
Okay, thanks.
Director, it seems like if you've got cash flow challenges, there's sort of two big ways of dealing with it. One is to either eliminate or postpone projects. Another is to find some way to get cash in. And I guess I wanted to ask about that. Can you remind me, I could pull out the budget, but could you remind me what the big projects are for which that cash flow is really important in the next two?
Which one?
Wastewater.
Wastewater is generally just one big project. It's this like $5 million solids handling project, which has a really big impact on that fund. And then just the cost inflation with that. Generally, other things for wastewater are more maintenance oriented, so more like $500,000 type projects, nothing big. But again, $500,000 is a big deal to that fund as well. It's just not a bigger fund as much as the water fund is. So that's wastewater side. Stormwater is easy. I said we've got another floodplain project coming up. And then water, we've got a couple resiliency projects for delivering water to different areas of the city. We've got an admin building expansion, and then a ton of maintenance projects for the treatment plants, and then aggressive distribution line replacement program.
Yeah, and I guess I should have said just focusing on wastewater because that's where the big increase is.
Yeah.
And I presume that there's a reason why that one is a big increase and the others aren't. They're commensurate with whatever projects or whatever cash flow you need for those different areas. And I too am, I'm troubled by the increase. And we can talk about this amongst council in just a little bit. But another thing I see is that at least, and I don't want to get too far into the loan piece because that's coming, but it looks like that $900,000 loan does help with the rate increase, like by
Significantly.
1.5% or something.
No, it brought
my-
things from like 30% down to like the 16%.
But just on wastewater, how does it?
Yeah, on wastewater.
Okay,
It like
so-
halve the percentage.
Let me ask you, I'm sorry, I misspoke then. If the loan were greater, the effect would be even more significant, right? I mean, what I'm getting
I
at
don't know
is,
about that.
don't know.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm trying to get at is whether bumping up the loan for the next few years is going to help us smooth, whether that might, I don't know how all these things work together, to be honest, but if the loan that we're talking about dealing with in a couple of weeks were larger, would it not help our, I don't know if that's going to affect the rates or not.
Yeah, I mean, we played with a lot of different things, and this was kind of what felt like the best balance. Corey generally is the head in the model, running the model, and I don't know, his boss let him go on spring break, so he's not here tonight. He could dive in a little bit more on that, but yeah, I mean, generally we litmus tested a lot of things, and like you got the dynamics of, you increase or you decrease 24 by 1% and 25 by 0.5%, and then you pick up another $500,000 on the loan, and you play with all these things. And he probably spent way more time than he wanted to, like analyzing all this, and this was the balance. Now, what we can do is, in June when we get with the finance committee, this loan situation is kind of set up on draws, so we're going to take, I think, let me go back to the loan page, 300 and 600,000, so not all at once, and
So through the mayor, just for a moment, if I could interject, if you look at the rate proposed for the water fund at 6%, I would think that if we were to transfer more money from the water fund as the intertransfer loan to the wastewater fund, that may impact the water fund increase. So if you transfer more, you might result in a greater increase in water to reduce the rate increase in wastewater.
Yeah.
So per Kurt's recommendation, I think that what's proposed and is vetted through the finance committee and brought before council, as he noted, it'll be brought before to evaluate for next year within the next couple of months. And so proceeding with this recommendation at this point in time, and to give us time to really evaluate the funds and smoothing opportunities. And going back to Mayor Pro Tem's question about what happens in 2036, if you look at, we just had debt fall off this year, and we still have rate increases that are proposed. So I think it'd be difficult to say that in 2036, we're going to see a reduction just because we're not seeing that now.
Thanks.
I love that.
That's helpful.
Thank you.
Just to that question though, or to that point, because your table didn't go back, I was understanding that we were maybe paying not enough back in the 2.4, we're paying more against the other one. So I wonder if like our debt repayment is similar to previous years, even though we've canceled some debt, the actual debt repayment is still similar to 23 and 24 because your table started in 2025 at 2.0 and 0.4. So I just don't know what 23 was or what 24 was. Was it?
The bottom line was roughly the same, but the impacts, that interest-only payment was starting to ramp up.
Right.
And I believe 25 is the first year of full payment on those loans. So we've also been ramping up. the payment.
Yeah, I just, we're paying multiple loans, and now we're paying one, but it's the same payment amount.
Right.
It wouldn't really affect our,
Right.
what
And
we have to
that,
collect, but if they're all gone, then we really will pay less. But anyway, sorry.
correct. I also want to clarify, the interloan is like an off to the side loan. It's not in that 2.4 bottom line. Okay. So yeah, I was just going to the point on the loan, you know, in 25, we're going to pull 600, and then 26 is 300. Those are best guesses on cash flow. So the cash flow on the project can also move around depending on timing. We're trying to time a lot of things right now and then give you numbers to our best guess. So a lot of this wiggle will happen. And to City Manager Langley's comments, you do get riskier on the water side by leveraging the water. So those
I appreciate that. Any other questions from council? Yes.
I just have one quick question, and that's that, going back to Mr. Parcher's comments, climate change is impacting the water supply and therefore the cost of water. And so how are we managing to prepare for higher water costs per gallon?
Yeah, we our tap fees have a certain percentage, let's say, I don't know, 60, 70% is water costs, and then 40% is buy-in to the infrastructure that we've built. And so we have one water right, it's Colorado Big Thompson, is the most, I would say, cleanest or convenient water right for us to go get in this day and age. And so we watch the price of this water right, and our tap fee is based off the annual cost of that water. And so as that water cost goes up, then we will come to you and recommend if we need to raise our tap fee so that we're keeping par with the cost of water.
Okay, and then following up, then in the summer, when we have a hot, dry summer and people are watering, are you anticipating any point where we would restrict outside irrigation?
We don't do water planning to restrict outdoor irrigation. We plan for the community to be whole in all its uses. Now that said, the way droughts work, I guess, Drought 101 is it's not about a 1-year impact, it's about a 2 to 3 year impact. So it's like the first year we're good on water, then we have a dry winter. The second year, water levels might start to dwindle, and then we start to think about drought with you all. We might do low-level restrictions like 10 to 20% targets. Then you get into a third year with another dry winter, and then water levels are really stressed. Then you might start to see like 30 to 40% target cuts, which gets into how people water outdoors, maybe like 3 times a week or 2 times a week. So it depends how that drought goes, and that's how we look at that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. And I presume, thinking you guys probably got your questions answered at finance, but go ahead, Councilmember Cooperman.
Could you just remind us what assistance is available to residents on their water bills?
Dollar amount, I don't have the top of my head, but we provide money to Sister Carmen. People work through Sister Carmen. Sister Carmen then works with those people to pay either their rent or their utility bills. Generally, Sister Carmen prefers to like take care of their rent, which then frees up that cash for groceries and utility bills. So they're experts in that. They have the amount of staff to give people the right amount of care around that. So we pay money to Sister Carmen and then that assistance opportunity.
And how do we advertise that to residents?
I believe we've had it in the mailers when we send the rates out, and I think we've maybe blasted it other times, but I would have to kind of go get a follow-up of all our comms to give you that answer.
I can confirm it is in the mailers.
Great, thank you very much.
Why don't we take some public comment? If we have any. Do we have any? No public comment. All right, well then back to council for comment. Yes, Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. Actually, Director Coher, thank you for the presentation and the work that went into this. And when this was brought to the Finance Committee, there there was a lot of discussion and consideration in how to extend this to lessen the burden to the residents, to the community. And this was the proposal, to the new city manager's point, to still maintain the necessary cash levels in the water fund. And as it was presented to us, this was like the best compromise. And to kind of build on, because it wasn't a question, I wanted to make a comment about Sister Carmen. The city of Louisville makes contributions every single year. So we fund Sister Carmen to assist the people in our community who may struggle with these type of rate increases. And I strongly recommend, I realize it's 7 and there may not be a ton of people watching tonight, but I strongly recommend that our residents who see this coming, that have a concern, that see it on their water bill, and Espanol as well, that they follow those guidelines, they reach out to Sister Carmen. They are very generous in how they award assistance with people's utility bills. And so I think there was a conservative measure made through finance as well as you, Director, in kind of making these suggestions for us. I do agree. Anytime somebody sees something in the double digits as an increase, or it's greater than 10 a month, it feels, right? I mean, everybody feels a double-digit increase. What I think the overall goal is that in very short order, we will not have to sustain this. And moving forward, we have better ideas in how to prevent these like huge loads on the wastewater system, correct? Okay. That was my only comment, is to really plead with people. The Sister Carmen funds are currently underutilized by Louisville residents, and I think a lot of this is, to Councilmember Cooperman's point, making sure that it is communicated. I do see a copy of the flyer that you put into the full packet of presentation. That information will be sent out. Everybody should know, to all the residents in the whole community. So thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add, we're not alone. Everyone around us is experiencing double-digit rate increases, and not like 10 or 15, like 20 or 30. We're all getting hit by inflation and the cost of everything. It's a tough environment.
And I think that we all know from experience that these are issues that do come up. Constituents mention this all the time, and particularly those on fixed income. A good point for Councilmember Kern. I want to say thank you to the Finance Committee, but I wanted to ask Councilmember Hamilton, who I think was in the earlier meetings and is on there now, if she has any other comment from Finance on any of this.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
appreciate
Mayor.
all the work that you all have done and vetting of all this, because that, as the city manager mentioned, that's very important here.
Yeah, in the absence of our committee chair, I'm happy to provide some insight from the Finance Committee. So first of all, Kurt, thank you to you and your team and the finance team. What was presented tonight to the council is the result of months of work, of back and forth, of FICOM asking staff to come back to us with creative solutions to try to reduce the increase in utility fees, while still remaining competitive in pricing and maintaining that really high quality that our residents have grown accustomed to. So thank you for that. It was a lot of work. And where we landed and what you all saw tonight really is a result of that desire to create a smoothing effect. It may not be as smooth as, some may like or we all may like, but where we started was a much more dramatic increase than where we ended. And I won't get into the details, but the loan solution that was proposed, I think we hit a really nice sweet spot on that amount that balances the pros and cons across those two funds. And I'm in support of what we have here in front of us tonight. I would say, looking at the future projections, and we discussed this in Finance Committee as well, really, once you get out beyond 5 years or so, we could probably benefit from maybe just chopping that off from the presentation because it is so variable and things change so much year to year. So just focusing on where we are right now, I think we have a great solution at hand. And I also appreciate the insert as well that not only communicates this rate changes to our residents, but also puts it in the context of the surrounding municipalities to reiterate what you messaged to us tonight. We're not alone, and we've done our best to minimize a rate increase impact on our residents. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other comments from council before we vote? Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate all this, and I again, we all have our different roles, right? So I've been serving on the Economic Vitality Committee, and now the LRC and not Finance Committee. So, you know, a lot of hard work before these meetings, and then it comes here, and then we still have a opportunity to weigh in. And so, my only confusion, right, is having gotten some more information and learning a little bit more about it, is when I see, and you can find your water fund 6% every year, and it's got the graph at the bottom. Yep. So that blue bar over the top line tells me we have $4 million in excess cash in the short term. So I don't understand why we can't lend an extra million, because we're not strapped for cash in the water reserves, and that money gets paid back. It all gets paid back. It's just an internal loan. But the graphs I'm seeing show me we have ample funds in the water fund in the short term that we could say do a 9% increase for 5 years. Instead of 16,900, we could do 99999 over a 5-year period instead of 16,900. So it's smoother.
You're talking wastewater, though.
Well, yeah, so we could, with wastewater, we could do, instead of 16,900, we just do 9s for 5 years, which is smoother. But if you only do 9, you won't have enough cash. But you can borrow more cash from water because you have $4 million in excess of reserves. You have $8 million when you only need $4 million. So I'm going off of what you guys are saying, is that like we can't borrow more money from water fund because we'd have to increase the rate. But it doesn't look to me by these graphs that we would have to increase the water rate because we have $4 million extra. So we could take more and do a slower increase. And 9% over 5 years is a 53% increase. 16,900 is a 43% increase. So it's actually a higher increase over time, but it's smoother, and we're using funds that we have on hand. So if I can just understand, because I agree with everything you guys have been saying, but it just doesn't, I'm seeing that we have those funds to do that and make it smoother.
I mean, we're in 2025 at 8 million versus 4 million for the reserve. What I'm hearing is you want a scenario, Rand. And I'm not going to try to do math on the fly tonight. Like, my head is not in that mode to do that tonight. And we can do that and come back to you in 2 weeks. I think what we're trying to do, I don't want to speak for anyone's money, but we're talking about 2 Starbucks per month for the rate increase for your core services in life. I want to go back to just what it was.
Yeah, I think
For
stormwater.
wastewater, we're talking about $6. So we can leverage the water more. We can make percentages look better, and we might shave $1 or $2. Now, I don't want to speak for anyone and say that's not a big deal, but I think we can easily get our other funds into trouble by being too cute with all of this and not staying conservative like you have indicated we should. I also think that your water fund revenue, we have a large project load coming, and we haven't bid anything out yet, and prices can move $1 million or $2 on these size projects, and so you could lose $1 million or $2 on bids without, even though you have an engineer's estimate that says it's cheaper. Also, the seasonal impacts that we're seeing right now, we're having $2 million swings between seasons. So like project load and a seasonal impact, if we get the wrong bids and the wrong seasonal hit at the same time, that could be a $2 to $4 million hit. So I don't feel like we have as much money as it feels like. I mean, if you're asking me to drive the bus and steer it, I like it the way it is.
That's great. And I think, you know, the slide that we want to focus on generally, right? I think the most important thing is your community comparisons, which is more of a flyer that, you know, has gone or will go out to the community, and showing that 47 for Broomfield, 13 for Longmont, 12 for Lafayette, 11 for Louisville, right? I think that's the thing that we're pointing to. And again, to sort of restate your point, what I just suggested maybe drops that to 10%. Or 9.5%, like maybe we get to single digits, which is fun, but it's not changing that to 5%. It's not changing it to something, you know, substantial, and it's already lower than our three neighbors. So I think it's palatable. I think it's okay. Just wanted to kind of stress test the reasoning or extend the reasoning of like, well, if it worked halfway, kind of why not double that? If that was helpful and it cut us from 30 to 15, why wouldn't we do a little more if we've got cash on hand? So I think your answers of some uncertainty of other projects that are coming in, that's fine. And I don't want to delay this 2 weeks for 1% or $3 per bill. But I think as we move forward in future years, looking at this again, because we kind of look at this every year, we do look at this every year, and just kind of, you know, mapping this again and seeing like, okay, are we truly smoothing as much as we can? Or are we sort of saying we're smoothing, but we're kind of reacting to what's right in front of us? And should we be smoothing earlier as opposed to today, right? Maybe we should have taken bigger actions 2 years ago. But I'm cool with where we are tonight.
What I would also offer as a refresher, we're transparent. Corey and I are not afraid to sit down with anyone. You can anytime schedule an appointment with us. We can sit for an hour or two as long as you want. We can run the models real time. You can say, try this, try that, try that. And I think, I hate when I hear loud drops these days. It's that time of year. I think if you have that much curiosity or you want to understand those sensitivities coming and sitting down with us, it's easier to get your head in the game around that for future years by doing it one-on-one. And we would invite everyone. We will geek out with you as much as you want.
I want to say that I appreciate staff working on this, and I appreciate the Finance Committee putting their stamp on it, because I know that they're watching this closely, and I know that you guys and Corey particularly watch this like a hawk. I am heartened by the way that you do it, which is that quarterly piece. To me, that's astonishing. That's very, very good, careful public policy adjustment and analysis, and that is good. And I think second, the fact that there's going to be a view on this from, you know, you're going to be talking to finance in short order about this. If there were, you know, some big change, you could, you know, we can make an adjustment, I'm sure. I too agree that it's, you know, the story that you tell in that insert is a good one, and it's sometimes hard with our blinders on to think about, you know, the fact that we're doing really well, and we shouldn't, you know, we shouldn't be defensive necessarily about something that's kind of, for better or worse, a fact of life. So I am, with that, going to move, just because I want to get us going here, move the passage of Resolution number 23, Series 2025, a resolution setting certain water, wastewater, stormwater, and other fees, rates, charges for the city of Louisville, Colorado.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Okay. Can, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item, it's just the Kurt Coer show, isn't it?
So lucky.
To award contract for 2025 lead and copper water service line potholing and verification project to Recon Utility Services.
Yeah, so at a high level, just kind of from the whole Flint, Michigan-led situation. The EPA over time came out with lead and copper rulings where every municipality has to.
I think we skipped an agenda item.
Yeah, I feel like we did, but I was just rolling.
Yeah.
Sorry about
We're on
that.
a drying bed, right?
Yeah, I was
Yes.
like,
All right. I picked up what you're laying down. I was like, okay,
Thanks. But I gotta go by the agenda that we adopted.
okay.
I'm just testing everybody. I'd like to be able to say
Caleb's
that,
the one
but
that
not.
called you out, not me.
All right, let's, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Let's go back for just a moment to the approval of contract between the City of Louisville and Glacier Construction Company, Inc. for the Howard Berry Water Treatment Drying Bed Media Replacement. I just wanted to say Recon Utility Services as quickly as I
Heck yeah.
could. That was, yeah, if we can start that, is there a staff presentation on it?
Minimal presentation. So this is a routine maintenance project. It was in our 23-24 CIP capital budget. Somehow through the 25-26 budget submittal, so we manually submit like 100 to 120 project sheets. This project inadvertently dropped out of the submissions. I can't explain why. It was in conversations where it was going to be capital or operational, and I think somewhere in the flurry of things last year, it just got lost in the cracks out of all those projects. So it, fortunately, in the rates that you just approved, is in the rate model, but it's not a sheet in the budget book. So it is paid for, and so we need to do a budget amendment to recognize the cost officially for this planned project. We're looking for a $165,000 budget amendment to complete it. So essentially what it is we filter stuff out of the water, and then that water that has all the stuff in it that we filtered goes to a drying bed, and the water filters down through like sand and gravel, and everything we filtered out stays on top. After a period of time, we go in and we get rid of all that and landfill it, but also our filter media, we lose filter media each time we do that. And so this is just renewing those filter beds. So that's the presentation. Happy to answer questions. It's on discussion because it's a budget amendment.
Yep, I understand. Councilmember Cramlington.
Thank you, Mayor. So let me repeat back to you what I think I heard you say regarding budgeting for this. It was an oversight to not include it on our 25-26 budget as a line item. However, revenues from that we just discussed from utilities had planned for this to cover the costs of this project.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So this would not necessarily impact the bottom line for our general fund or whatnot as a CIP project. Because even though it wasn't a line item as a cost, we budgeted for it in a way with our utility costs.
Yeah, it's a water fund, a budget amendment to the water fund, and the project carried through in our rate. Like if you were to look at your budget book and you go to the project section, you see a kind of a spreadsheet of the projects over the 6-year period. We have a different spreadsheet for the rate modeling. That's what you'll come and geek out on eventually. And you will. And the project carried through in that the whole way. And it was in that 23-24 budget model. And then when we reset, and if you don't know this, our budget process is very manual. So we have to collate and submit hundreds of sheets. The sheet just for some reason didn't get submitted. I think at that time, we were going to try and put it into operational costs. There was a debate whether it should be in capital or operating. And somewhere in that process, I'm just going to throw Corey under the bus. He messed it up. No, I'm just kidding. No, we as a team dropped that ball on just this one project. And so here we are. But it's still in the rate model. And so the water fund has adequate revenues, zero impact to the bottom line.
Okay, that's helpful. And I think as a side note to the city manager and deputy, I think this is a great example as to how we need to modernize our systems as well. But that's all I'll say in it because it's not on the agenda.
I like it.
Comments? Okay, can we take any public comment? Do we have any public comment? No, back to council. Can I get a motion?
A motion to approve of contract between the City of Louisville and Glacier Construction Company for the Howard Berry Water Treatment Drying Bed Media Replacement.
Second.
Okay, and can we, I guess we just need a, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Now I get to say it again. Award contract for 2025 lead and copper water service line potholing and verification project to Recon Utility Services. Any presentation on this one?
Very basic. So we carried roughly a $500,000 allowance, and again, the utility rate model, as we were developing this lead and copper program. So the lead and copper program is to do an inventory of all the service lines in the city and determine what materials they are made out of, and to make sure we don't have lead or galvanized service lines that could have health impacts to our residents. So we have roughly 7,000 services, and through audit of building records of when things were built at different periods in time, we were able to narrow that down to roughly 4,000 structures that may or may not have lead lines. We have to, through a process, get a 95% confidence level on that remaining amount, and so that's roughly 350 to 400 homes. And so we have sent mailers out multiple times to random sample of homes for homeowners to do a self-assessment inside and then send us back. As we've gathered all those results and determined where we have answers and where we don't, we developed a confidence level of how many services we as a city have to go pothole, which is essentially dig a small hole down to the service line and then visually examine it to know what material it is. So as we've developed the total number of homes that we need to do that at, we were able to put a contract together, put a bid out, and then get an actual cost. So what you're seeing today is a project that we did not submit during the budget process because we just did not have high confidence levels, and the team was trying to figure out a lot of things at that time. But we did have an allowance we held in the rate model, so it doesn't affect your bottom line. And today we're bringing that project forward to the tune of roughly $400,000 to approve our low bidder to go out and do this potholing so that we can verify with confidence our lead and copper issues on service lines. We think our risk is low. We don't think we have a problem out there, but this is the compliance process through the EPA that every city is following. And so that's the contract before you with Recon Utility Services. So appreciate the consideration on it and appreciate the budget amendment.
Any questions? Yeah, Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. So I appreciate that we're getting in line with this. This is great. My one question is, I'm glad that you're going to be notifying homeowners if they are a part, like at the end of that, a line that would be impacted. It stated in here, though, that they would just be requested that they pay for their portion. So is the portion of the line that is not city-owned, just as for public clarity, is it the piece that goes basically from the property line that they connect into their home?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, sorry, not property, the meter. Oh. So their responsibility is at the meter to the home and then into the home.
Okay, so the city will be taking care then if they should find lead or any other things from like right up to in each individual homeowner's meter.
We would take care of what's coming from the street to the meter if that was lead.
And then you'll notify them, not you, the city, but the individual homeowners would have to verify whether those pipes in their own home were at risk.
Correct.
So that's not anything the city would have a record of? Then we would not be keeping a record of any homes that might still also be at risk?
Well, we know the age of the home and when it was built, but we don't know, you don't have records on the exact materials that are in a home. We don't know the type of electrical wire or plumbing,
Would this be a document that is available when, let's say one of the older historic homes goes for resale? would it be a document that's included in the sale papers that at least says that the city has found and therefore remediated any issues with the pipes, or has found that there is no needed remediation, so that future homeowners can know what their safety levels are moving into those older homes?
I don't think we've thought that far ahead yet because we just don't think we have a problem out there.
Okay.
But once we finish this process, then we'll kind of start to think about what we found and maybe what that means. And if it means something, we'll have to have a bigger conversation with all of you about who pays for what, how do we record that, how do we notify people. So to be determined and more to come. Today is just one hop to like continue the math of eliminating the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, Councilmember Cooperman.
I guess I'm curious, so if more homeowners participated and sent back, looked for themselves and sent you information about what's in their home, would that reduce the amount of work that the consultant or the contractor would have to do for us?
Yes, we have mailers out there right now, and as we're starting to notify people that we might need a pothole, they're suddenly sending more in. So like this is like still evolving.
Okay. And so the amount that we end up paying the contractor, will that scale down if we need them to do less?
It would scale down. These are unit costs.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Why don't we move to public comment? Any public comment on this one? No? All right, back to council. Can we get a motion?
The only comment that I would make is, upon receiving these flyers, there's a bit of like instant sort of like, oh, wait, we have lead pipes? So since mostly we don't, I think it'd be really important when we finish this project that we send whatever that cost is, a mailer to the same home saying, great news, no lead in Louisville, right? Like, because when I received it personally, it's like, oh, wait, there's a concern that we have lead pipes coming in my, like, I had never had a concern that there's a lead pipe coming in my home, and now I do. That was not a fear I used to have. And so we should definitely remedy that when it's done with great news if we have it. And if we don't, 400 is going to be a joke. We'll be spending a lot of money if that's not the case. But hopefully that is the case, is that we have great lines and everyone's super happy, and I just hope that communication goes out as clearly as possible.
Okay. Can we get a motion? Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
I have a comment. Yeah.
Okay, we're not ready for a motion yet.
Go ahead.
So at this point tonight, we have over $500,000 of budget amendments related to our water fund. One of which was an oversight. The other of which you explained is it was challenging to plan for. On being a finance committee member and having to work through that 25-26 budget, and we all had to make some really difficult decisions, I just would like to, as a group, in our next budgeting process, maybe have a placeholder for something like this if we don't quite know. Just I'd rather have it planned for and not use it than to have to do these really big budget amendments for a very important things. So we're going to do it. But I think a placeholder might be wise in the future, rather than having these unexpected costs pop up as budget amendments. So that's just my comment. I will approve this, but I needed to mention that given the large amounts.
I agree 100%. I don't think these last few items were ideal. The last couple years have been very unique and a little chaotic, and so I don't think it's been as polished as we like to be either, and I see the future being much more polished. So your comments are well taken, and we agree.
I think we get better every year. That's what we aim to do.
Story of my life, Mayor.
Well, I'd rather it be that way than the other way,
Totally.
right?
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
there we go. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the award contract for the 2025 lead and copper water service line potholing and verification project to Recon Utility Services.
Second.
Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. The next item is discussion, direction, action on the block party trailer donation budget amendment.
So, I wish the council would have planned a little more and we would have had this in the budget, but we don't, so we're here talking about a budget amendment.
This one
For a party
is a
trailer,
small
block
amendment.
party-
It's a small amendment.
Small budget amendment for a block party trailer. I think there's been a lot of energy from Marshall Together and other members in the community that would like us to consider this. I also know that Superior has gone through this in a little different style, different configuration. But we Public Works has taken on the block party trailer, and we've done our research, and we've kind of scouted out what we think we need to do it right. And when we say do it right, we have the ability to put the proper barricade systems in the trailer so they travel with the trailer. And when there's a block party, it's not a lightweight barricade, it's a real barricade. Also, the trailer that we're proposing is lit up, so if we're partying through the year and it's dark at 5, we can see what we're doing inside there for our staff and the safety of the people using it, along with solar and batteries to kind of power that stuff without it always being plugged in. Build in some contingency to equip it with tables and chairs and tents and all the fun stuff. And so this is what's before you, is that consideration. There's also money in here to do some design for graphics to wrap it so that our brand is out there and we're proud. It's not just a white trailer sitting on the street that will probably generate calls if people don't know why there's a white trailer on their street. So these are all things for consideration. And I know you all have a lot of ideas, so we'd love to hear what you got.
I don't have any ideas. I just wanted to clarify. This means that every party where this goes to is going to be lit, right?
Exactly. Thank God someone's on board here.
Okay. Any questions? Yes.
He'll be here all night, folks. So first question, does this impact our insurance at all for the city? Do we have to be insured for this, and is that cost captured here? Did I miss that?
A few things. We haven't done that research to the extent we should, so we don't have that answer tonight. And also, I know like things around scheduling were brought up and how long out you got to schedule, and so those are things to be worked out. So I'm going to say no, we don't have that answer tonight. We'll have to get it. We're just seeing if you even want to do this before we spend a bunch of staff time on it, and then we are happy to come back with some of those answers. It'll be a small increment. I don't think it's a game changer.
Okay, yeah. So there will likely be an additional cost, albeit probably small, from an insurance perspective. So that would be another line that we would have in here. My second question is, have there been conversations around if Louisville as a city is the appropriate group to be housing and facilitating this resource, or is there another group in the community that is best suited to facilitate this resource?
I'm going to defer to Sam on this.
Sure, so I'll jump into this. This offer came to Louisville just like it came to Superior. I think there could be other groups who have interest in this. That's not something we've pursued in any formal way, trying to connect Marshall Together and another group. I think that's something that would be interesting for council to weigh in on. Certainly if you have any program that has street closures or something like that, that may be something you want the city managing, because there'll have to be a process anyways.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
The questions? Yeah, Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. So how's the block party process handled now, so that we can kind of just understand comparing it to this? Because that might help in the insurance piece, the city managing block party things already the way we do it?
So currently, if someone wants to hold a block party, they fill out an application online. It comes to the clerk's office. I disseminate it to Public Works, Operations Team, Fire, and PD for their approval. If they sign off on it, operations usually, depending on the day, they're usually on a Saturday or a Sunday. Ops will drop the barricades on Friday. They are the responsibility of the homeowner that applied to keep them safe and put them out and pull them back in. And then Ops picks them up on Monday.
So the added piece then of having this trailer, it's not like you're dropping off the barricades and you drop off the trailer. The intention is that we have city staff assisting, or I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, we would deliver the trailer, depending on the timing, set the barricades, or work with citizens on setting, I don't know, there's some details to work out, but essentially, we deliver it all, they have a block party, then we come and pick it up, and that's how it would work.
And currently, if for some reason those barricades are damaged, is it the responsibility of the person who booked it, or does the city just bear that burden? Is that?
I mean, that's a heck of a party. I don't know. We'd have to see what the situation is. I mean, the barricades are pretty tough, and also at the same time, they're not significantly expensive. So
I was thinking of some of the other components that are now going to be part of that exact same here you go kind of thing, like a chest and
inventory.
tables and yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I can take this. In our current program, the applicant's responsible for maintenance, monitoring of all those barricades. We would plan to mirror our current program. So if we deliver you a block party with X, or a block party trailer with X, Y, and Z in it, we expect it to be returned with X, Y, and Z in a similar condition.
I know it's really early in us deciding this, but because it is a budget question and we still need to figure out the additional cost for insurance, I'd be curious to know if it will come with an inventory list and a potential concept of what it might cost a homeowner if this does not come back to the community, so that the city is not necessarily funding the replacement.
I mean, I think I could see some sort of deposit system, right? You want this trailer and all these things. You put down a deposit, we bring it to you, then we come pick it up and bring it back, we check inventory, and then maybe a deposit is returned.
So there might be two applications if somebody just wants a block party in the barricades versus, I'll use the mayor's term, a lit block party. So they don't have to maybe take this on. They could just say, no, we're good. We don't need the whole accommodating thing. We could just get barricades, and that would facilitate maybe more than one block party happening in the city at a time as well, that kind of thing. That would still be available?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to double check, sorry.
I mean, and our insurance typically works on like aggregates. So it's not like, I don't feel like this trailer is going to have its own specific insurance. It'll be under an umbrella of vehicles.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Cooperman.
Sort of a follow-up. So is there currently a fee for holding a block party?
No, it's free.
And do we envision there being any fee associated with a block party that has the trailer?
I don't think that was the intent. No fee. It's just lit.
So through the mayor, I do think that staff needs to analyze this. In terms of purchasing the trailer, first of all, what I heard from council is, thank you to the group for proposing to donate this to the city in recognition of that. Part of the implementation of this process, we're going to need to look at if it's on the weekend during non-normal business hours, call out costs for staff to deliver the trailer, pick the trailer up. What does the process look like for the checklist to make sure that all the supplies are returned, evaluating replacement costs? And so there is more that needs to go into vet this process. As Kurt noted tonight, is to determine whether or not council wants to approve the budget amendment to actually purchase the trailer. And I appreciate that Public Works has put so much thought into making sure that the trailer is right-sized for the equipment to try to minimize staff time and increase efficiencies. But from an insurance perspective, I think we need to look at special event insurance that would be available, depending upon the type of event that they're proposing. and there could be some type of tiered system depending upon what they're requesting. And so tonight is really the early stages, but we would need to come back with a program as to that provides some options and different complexities based upon the proposed block parties or how this trailer could be used.
Yep.
One last question from me. So is there a specific timeline in which this decision has to be made, or is it possible that it could fit in like our 27 budget? Like, does it have to be done this year or next year, the 2 years that we didn't budget for this?
I think Marshall Together is offering the money at this point in time, and so thank you to them. They're offering roughly $12,000 to assist in the purchase. I don't know what their plans are 2 years from now. We would have to, again, that's more follow-up.
I think that'd be a question that would be helpful in this decision-making process from a budgeting perspective.
Okay. Any other questions from council? All right, let's take some public comment.
Don Parcher?
Oh, you can go first. I'm from Marshall Together, so I can answer all these questions. You should go first. You go first, because if you have anything that comes up, I'll answer your questions.
Yeah, Don Parcher, Louisville, 378 Grouse Court. I'd like to see this approved. I don't know the impact on the budget, but I say about 13,500 we're talking about at the end. It seems to me it'd be money well spent. And I don't know how often the existing stuff, there's a trailer already, I think, but I don't know how often it's been used. But I anticipate with Neighbors Connect that it would be used a lot more in the near future. So I'd like to see that happen. And then, by the way, I'm working with, I've met with Scott Moore, Police Department, crime prevention specialist. And he has a program that's somewhat similar, so I'd be working with him on that Neighbors Connect program. And by the way, Neighbors Connect, I don't envision it requiring any funding from the city or anybody else. Thank you. I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Have you provided a card?
I forgot.
You can come on up and just state your name and your welcome.
Thank you. My name's Joel Hawksley. I live at 1008 Honeysuckle Lane. I'm a Marshall Fire Rebuilder. I'm here to represent Marshall Together on this matter. I was just taking notes on all the questions that you all discussed, and I figured I'd provide my answers to those to provide at least Marshall Together's perspective. One, the question is who should manage it. The idea for this program actually came from seeing other cities already doing it. Boulder has one, Westminster has one, Thornton, and it's a thing that's kind of common nationwide, I would say. It's not like typical, but you'll see it typically managed by cities. So that was the reason why we approached municipalities. We never actually considered seriously any other option. I'm heavily involved in my church. I did flood it by the church, and it was like not quite a good fit. So that's what we've modeled it after. In fact, the inventory we proposed and actually purchased for Superior is almost a line-for-line copy of the city of Boulders. So know that this is very typical. We literally even, I think Superior copied a lot of their verbiage even in both like all the legal documents around it and as well as like the documentation that was provided to the public. So we could even look to what those municipalities are doing in terms of how they communicate it, maybe even the fees they charge, for example. There's precedent here. I don't think we need to invent anything. Superior, I believe, charges a damage deposit. It's refundable, but they do have a deposit. It would be worth reaching out to them because they accepted Marshall Together's funds around this time last year, and actually I used the trailer in Louisville under their good graces. For our block party in our neighborhood, it was great. We had like 100 people, and the equipment was what made it work because of the fire, our neighborhoods don't have trees, so the trailer provided shade. It provided 6 or 8 shade tents, whatever it was, so it was a big deal for us. To speak to the staff requirements, Superior's policy is they deliver the trailer during business hours. So it's not, there's no overtime or anything. You deliver it Friday afternoon, pick it up Monday morning. No huge impact to staff that way. I will say that we made this offer at the same time that we made the offer to Superior. I believe it was 2 years ago was our original offer. So The question about timing, I don't have enough context to speak to that uncertainty, but I would say that it's probably not going to be an option 2 years from now for our financial support. So given you've seen all the cycles, like a lot of the financial incentives around the fire are running their course, these groups are winding down, I can imagine that the same thing will happen with a lot of Marshall Together's efforts. Any other questions I could try and answer on behalf of Marshall Together?
No, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks. Any other public comment? Okay. Let's go back to council. Councilmember Kern.
I actually did, now that I can comment instead of just ask questions, I did want to give a thank you to Marshall Together for offering this and being willing to, as they've done in other cities, provide something really fun and hopefully is not just in the affected areas, but it's for the whole community. And I love that level of outreach, so thank you.
Yeah, I think we also size the trailer so it can support our own special event staff to some extent for city-led events that are not block parties.
I will. Yeah. Other comments? Yeah. Ken.
Yeah, so the 2 year, I'm very aware of the length of time from the original offer to today. And I think that is unfortunate because it's a gift, and it's a gift that we have struggled to accept. And I do understand the city is not me, it's not, a normal resident, like, oh, thanks, we'll figure it out. It's like, whoa, hold on. How do we run that? How do we do that? Is it the right thing? How are we going to administer it? All those things. I still think from our perspective, there's a little bit of a black eye not to just say thank you and we'll figure it out. And so now, here we are figuring it out, and I think that's great. I think, when it comes to the budget of it, one of the reasons we're upping the game instead of just accepting sort of the gift as is and buying the trailer we can afford with that gift and instead trying to do something bigger and better, part of that is minimizing our overall cost over the years by being able to deliver barricades and the trailer at the same time. So I think it is important that those things both happen on a Friday and on a Monday, as opposed to if you're going to bring it on the day of so it's more convenient, well, then you could have brought the barricades on Friday. You're not really saving any time. You can have a smaller trailer that doesn't fit barricades. So I think the plan generally, the reason I bring that up is I don't think we need necessarily a smaller trailer that's less expensive. I like the concept you have. I think it's more efficient. I hope that it is for $30,000, it should have a lot of fun stuff in there, right? Because the difference between, $28,000 and $30,000 or $30,000 and $31,000, you'll never go over budget. So between 28 and 30 is like, oh, you can buy 10 extra tents for that amount, right? Like there's so much you can do with those last few dollars to make it really fun. I think it's a great concept to support people, and I know beyond approval or not approval of the actual project, there is some of the details we worked out of how it works, who gets to reserve it, priorities for Marshall Fire victims, things like that, how long ahead of time we have to reserve it, whether there's deposit, all those things need to be worked out. I trust that staff can work out those details. What I will say, and I said 2 years ago to Jeff Durbin, what I'll say to you now and to our current staff is Louisville Rising has offered to take this from day one. Like if the city doesn't want it, Louisville Rising will take it. We will administer the entire thing. We'd love it. So the additional request or offer is if the city needs any help with administration, with inventory check, with any of that, there is a local nonprofit that is available to assist. We don't have an extra $17,000 to do your cool trailer, but there is opportunity for assistance there. So it's maybe a little out of turn here, but I just want to make sure that's a known that there is support from a local nonprofit to help with the details in the future if needed.
Any other comments? Yeah, Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you. And thank you to our resident for answering my questions. Much appreciated. I'm interested in continuing this discussion and further investigating this option for the trailer for block parties. I was not aware, because what I see in the packet is 2024, so I was not aware of that history before then of how long this has been going on. So it makes sense that my question about budgeting it for the next cycle is probably a no. And we should move forward with discussions now. So I look forward to hearing some updates from staff on this.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Just two small comments, maybe things to think about. One would be, would we want to be able to service 2 block parties over a single weekend? I don't know.
Like 2 trailers?
No, like one on Saturday and one on Sunday.
We'd have to think through that.
I don't know.
It's possible. Again, there's costs, there's overtime
Right.
costs.
But just something to think about. And then the other thing, do we currently, or do we plan to have any thoughts around whether there is recycling and or composting associated with the trailer?
I mean, we can provide the apparatus, right? But generally with these types of situations, it's like, are the people actually gonna like use it the right way? And are you spending good money towards something that won't be respected and utilized? And so then it's just like something that doesn't really, the outcome isn't what you wanted it to be. And could that same amount of money be spent elsewhere to guarantee your outcome? That would be the. I would also say it's a block party with a fantastic curbside trash, recycling, and compost program.
A lit block party.
A lit block party.
Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. That's all I was going to say is typically at these block parties, what happens is the people that are participating nearby, they bring out their fabulous curbside trash recycling and composting. And because these people all do live in the same block, they typically throw their garbage out the way that they want to, and we don't have to have it monitored by staff. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think we do want to put some parameters on this. We don't want a free-for-all where we're picking up a mess of a trailer and a pile of trash. Like, I think those will be rules that we'll have to like put into expectations.
Okay,
The proposal includes trash cans in the budget. In the line item, if you read it, there's 3 giant 55-gallon.
we're good.
They can be, when we used them for compost recycling.
Good. I've got to say a few things. I am enormously frustrated, and it's not with it's with the whole process. We had I think an unfortunate thing that happened a couple of years ago, which was that the city manager threw up the gauntlet of a whole bunch of things, and was I think not kind to the Marshall Together group, which all they wanted to do was donate a trailer for us to use, which in my view was like something we should have immediately said thank you to. There were things that had to happen. My understanding is it was going to have to be modified to be able to work with our barricades and so forth. But these are small things. This is a $17,000, and we spend this much in 2 hours a day. And so I don't think any of the concerns that we have are particularly going to break the bank. I think they're concerns mostly that staff can deal with. And if we have questions, and I think we do have questions, you've heard the questions, can be brought forward, and it'll be a great thing. I think, I'm sad because I've seen the whole thing kind of unfold, and it's just been a series of crashes, not to the trailer, thankfully. I think just to step back for a second, I remember when I was running for mayor, one person told me, and I think I've said this sometimes, that we need more fun in Louisville. And I've told the mayor pro tem that he's the fun. I'm something else, but no one would necessarily come to me and say I was fun. But why is that important. It's important for a lot of things. But a community like ours knows from experience that a lot of things, a lot of our signatures events are fun, are really fun. And this is kind of a small thing, you know, provided, so almost half of it is provided by a private group to say, in some ways, thank you. In some ways, here's how you can make our community better. And we know that these kinds of things, these kinds of parties, and Marshall Together knows how to throw a party and do a really good job of keeping people excited. And I think that's a good example. I think to the point that was raised earlier, getting neighborhoods together is one great way of helping those neighborhoods fight crime. Knowing who your neighbors are, feeling connected to your neighbors, huge. Some other folks have said, and I know this has happened in neighborhoods of which I've been a part in the past, somebody dies, somebody takes their own life. Often, you know, people are absolutely shocked. They don't even know that anybody lived there, much less that they were having trouble or whatnot. These are things which our community values. Our community values them too. And it's a minimal cost. I really think this is going to be a great thing. And I've said that to you over the years. And I appreciate your coming forward. And I appreciate the questions. I think the questions we can work with. But I really appreciate the possibility of doing something kind of cool and kind of fun. And the Mayor Pro Tem has said he will personally show up and he will bring the fun if this happens. So
I think we should have a fun contest. Let's see who is fun.
there you go. And others on council can vie for it, and even the dog mayor, or excuse me, the pet mayor, sorry. Being specious again. Anyway, I'm going to move, well, we don't have to move. We're just giving discussion and direction. Are there any other things besides that are we cool with? Do you understand our direction? And
So just clarification, you're giving us the approval for the $30,000 allowance. We're going to go buy this. We're going to do the research. We'll come back with what the program looks like.
yeah,
We're not going to do another hop with council.
we probably do need a budget amendment for that, yeah? And
This
and
is
we
the
can-
budget amendment. We do
yeah.
need a,
It's on there for budget amendment, yeah, discussion direction, but
So
are
thank you,
gonna
Mayor.
come
Yes,
back
we
with
are looking for your support for a budget amendment here, and then we will wrap that into the budget amendment coming to council in May.
Gotcha. All right. Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. Okay. That's your mark of approval. Thank you very much. And thank you more than you know. Thanks for coming tonight, and thank you for speaking, and please tell other folks in Marshall Together that we got it done. Great.
council, just real quick, thanks for the time. What I did not do an item or two ago is just, I want to give Corey Peterson credit for a lot of good work. He's not here tonight. I just want to recognize him for a lot of success in the rate process, so.
Gotcha.
Could we also get the gentleman who spoke to sign with a speaking card to give to the clerk? Thank you.
Right. Next is resolution number 24, series 2025, a resolution updating historic structure, assessment grant amounts and requirements for completion of historic structure assessments prior to landmarking. Do we have?
All right, well, good evening, Mayor Lay, members of City Council, Rob Zucchero, Community Development Director. I'm going to be presenting on this item here. All right. So what's before you is a proposal to increase the historic structure assessment grants for both residential and commercial properties. This is part of our historic preservation funding program. It's really kind of a smaller part of it, and I'll get into some of the background on that. But I wanted to go into a little bit of background, too, just about our historic preservation fund. I know some of you have been on the commission. All of you have seen grant applications, but I wanted to go into the history a little bit because it helps set up this discussion. The city's historic preservation program is very well known. We're one of the few, if not one of the only, sales tax funded grant programs in the nation. So we have a lot to be proud of, but that began in 2008. The residents voted for that sales tax. And by 2010, we had our first kind of baby grant program. That was version 1.0. And we had a $1,000 incentive if you landmarked, $5,000 for restoration, rehabilitation of historic structures. That was both for commercial properties and residential properties. We had a thing called pre-development studies that you could fund, but it came out of that $5,000 grant. There wasn't an additional grant. In 2012, this is what I'm kind of calling our modern era of grants. We got a lot more sophisticated and adopted much more aggressive grants, up to $250,000 for commercial properties, $21,000 for residential properties, and we had a thing called a historic structure assessment. This was, you had to be landmarked though in order to get that historic structure assessment. In 2014, staff figured out, it might be very helpful that you do these reports and assessments before you landmark. So we allowed them prior to landmarking. We didn't require it. And then going to 2018. So that was a 10-year sales tax. In 2018, we took it back out to the voters. They adopted it for another 10 years. And we, again, re-envisioned those grants. We did a lot of outreach, talked to a lot of architects, homeowners, business owners, upped those grants. We also required that the HSAs be done prior to landmarking. They were so valuable in determining could this property be saved, what's really got to go into it. Most of our landmarks come with grant requests, so it really helps to inform the grant requests as well. Now, the Historic Preservation Fund also, per the ballot measure, has to be used primarily for incentives for landmarking. That's written into the ballot language. That's what we have to use it for. We can also use it for administration. That was back from 2008. In 2018, there was a slight change to that where a portion of that could go to our historical museum for administrative purposes, but the funds are limited to all of those purposes. So what is a historic structure assessment? When you get a landmark and a grant request, these are in your packet. That's probably your primary exposure to these because the historic structure assessment grants are approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. They don't have to go to you for approval like the rehabilitation and preservation grants. But you do get these reports in your packets with those landmarks and grant requests. We have adopted a standard scope, and we followed it straight from History Colorado. They have historic structure assessment grants as well. We have word for word the exact scope that they use. You're really looking at, of course, the history. We actually tap into our historical museum. They do these great reports on the history, the social history, the architectural history. Those are given to the applicants and their architects, and then they supplement that. They look at the structure itself. They're looking at all the mechanical systems, the foundation, the electrical systems. They are doing an assessment and determining what are priorities in order for this structure to be around for a long time, to be maintained, as well as putting together a preservation plan. So they're looking at the historic elements and prioritizing and making a plan for rehabilitation and restoration to maintain historical elements, or in some cases bring back historical elements. So they're very important to our process. Again, we work with applicants. This is actually a really great tool for people who are even thinking of demolition. Oftentimes we'll go to those residents or business owners and say, hey, before you, and we do have, you're probably familiar, we have a temporary demolition stay. We don't have anything permanent. We're all incentive-based, but we can put stays on properties that are going through demolition, either partial or full. Oftentimes, especially with full demolitions, we really try to push this program and say, you may not want to save the building, but maybe you want to do an HSA because you might see some things that make you change your mind because, oh, maybe it is realistic to save this because the systems and the foundations and the mechanical systems, there's money for that, and we can really understand what it's going to take to maintain this. And if nothing else, and the Historic Preservation Commission loves this part of HSAs too, is even if that building gets demolished, we have a historical record, a much deeper historical record of the property. So they do have value even beyond that. So last year, the Historic Preservation Commission brought this up. I do want to mention too that on last year's work plan, they've had this on their mind that they definitely want to update all of our grants, just not these. We've been without a historic preservation planner for, I think, about 9 months now. It's been a long-term vacancy, which we are trying very hard to hire, but it kind of impacted that work plan. So they asked us at the end of last year if we could at least move forward with the HSA grant update. Their highest priority this year is, again, to do all of the other grant updates. It's been a long time. It was 2019 when we last updated the grants. There's been a lot of inflation, COVID, construction inflation. We get about $800,000 a year approximately in the Historic Preservation Fund in revenues. We have not been spending that much. Our fund is over $3 million right now, so there's plenty of money to consider updating those incentives. But in December, they did a deep dive on HSAs. They had a lot of questions about our process, as well as the funding amounts. Through that discussion, they felt comfortable with the process we had in place, but they wanted to formalize it in the funding resolution. And we talked, and they gave staff direction on what they wanted to see the HSA grants be increased to. We worked with some local architects, one in particular who does the vast majority of our historic structure assessments. Over the last 2 years, we've only had 3 architects do historic structure assessments. One has done probably over 90% of those. They have a really good idea of what it costs. And they also want to bring in additional experts and make sure we could pay for additional experts on those historic structure assessments. The purpose of the grant for historic structure assessments is to pay for the whole project. So it's to pay for 100% of the cost. That's the intent of the proposal tonight. The grants for rehabilitation and preservation, those are meant to be split 50-50 other than the bonus grant. So this is a different concept to pay for the whole thing. We drafted the resolution and brought it to them in February. They're recommending approval. They had one update that is incorporated into your draft. So this is what's changing. Residential grants would go up from $4,000 to $7,000. Commercial grants would go up from $9,000 to $10,000. And they added a provision for extraordinary circumstances. So if an applicant comes to us and says, we really can't do an assessment for $7,500 or $10,000, then we could provide some demonstration that this is a new unique building. There's something unique about the property, size, location, architectural details, the structure itself. It really could be anything, but they need to demonstrate that there's a unique situation. It's just not, they have a really expensive architect. And the HPC could grant up to $10,000 for residential and $15,000 for commercial. Another big change is right now our funding resolution says that HSAs can be completed by an architect, a planner, a landscape architect, or anybody with special historic preservation experience. We would change it with this resolution to say it has to be a licensed architect that's leading the HSA. That's consistent with the state. And we would require a licensed structural engineer. There is some language in there about also encouraging other expertise coming in as needed, including mechanical and electrical engineers and experts to help supplement the report, but that's not required. We put into the funding resolution that the city would establish a scope of work. We've done it, but it's not in any of our documents. This would formalize that we're establishing a scope of work and staff's reviewing and approving the final HSA to make sure it has all of the required elements before we pay the grant. We're doing that now. We're just putting the language in the resolution. So that's the proposal this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council questions? Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you. First of all, appreciate the Historic Preservation Committee for tackling this item, and Rob, your team as well, for their work on this. I think it makes sense to increase what's covered, given the time that's lapsed and the cost of these things. My two questions are, first, the supplemental individuals and experts presumably would be encompassed under that 10K circumstance.
Not necessarily. I do think that the HSAs that we're getting now, from time to time, they do bring in expertise, and the input we were getting from the local architects was that they think in most circumstances they can use the 7,500 or 10,000 for commercial, 7,500 for residential, 10,000 for commercial, and even bring it. It's usually a very small amount that they're paying those sub-consultants.
Okay. Guess the
So-
residential up to 10K, would that likely
Yeah,
cover the sub-consultants?
I don't think that's the purpose of the 10K. The purpose isn't bringing in additional consultants. It's that there's something unique about the property that's making it more expensive. We think, based on the input and feedback we got, that you could bring in a mechanical or an electrical engineer or contractor, even if the architect thought there needed to be a little bit of additional analysis on that.
Okay. Would that be at the cost of the homeowner to cover those things then?
We think these grant amounts would pay for 100%, even if you have to bring in some of these
The supplemental.
sub-consultants.
And then my other question is, as someone who has lived this experience, the check that is cut to the resident is considered taxable income, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And residential up to 10K, I just want to make sure that people are educated that there'll be 10K more on their income statement, because that was a surprise to us. We didn't get that much, but in your conversations with these architects, I suspect I know who some of them are, is that, when you say it covers 100%, is that just the cost for the expert review, or will that likely have a little cushion to cover that additional income tax that will have to be paid by that individual?
Yeah, this is not intended to cover the additional income tax. This has to go to the fee that goes to the architect.
Okay.
And we do, I don't know, when you applied, I'm not sure if we did it at that time, but right now on the application form, we have someone initial and acknowledge the tax implications.
Okay. And there's, I guess I'm just thinking, like, if there is someone who is from like an affordable housing perspective, who's living in their historic home, could benefit from some of these evaluations and potential updates if they move forward in the process, but this upfront cost and potential taxable income could be a barrier. Is there anything else in our system that helps to assist with that, or is that just, it is what it is?
I don't know that we have anything here at the local level. I think that the state, and I don't know if it's low income based, but there are tax credit programs that you could apply for. I don't know that they'd apply to the income tax. I know Caleb's dealt with it personally. Yeah.
Okay. Do I have the power to say, Mayor Pro Tem, you may proceed? I just did.
He feels your pain, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think to that point, I believe the first residential building ever to get the extraordinary circumstances matching grant of, I think, $68,000. Spent every last dime of it, and then found out I owed $20,000 in taxes. I was like, I don't have another $20,000. I used all that. So I love that you guys have that on there and can talk about that and let people know. it would seem that with something like this, one way to avoid that just in this component is to submit an invoice to the city of up to 7,500, and the city would pay that invoice directly to the architect, and therefore that money never touches the homeowner's hands, and it is just directly paid, again, up to 7,500, and then you, instead of getting an invoice that you're like, yeah, we believe you, we'll reimburse you, you actually just pay that invoice directly, and then that's too complicated, I think, on the home remodel. But on this, where we're actually intending to cover the entire bill anyway, that could be a way to avoid a $2,000, $3,000 tax hit. But I support the concept generally.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We'll look into that. If we can do that, I don't think we have to put it in the resolution. We might be able to just change how we administer this. So thanks for the idea on that.
Any other questions?
Okay,
Who has questions?
both of us.
Councilmember Kern, did you have a question? Oh, go ahead. Councilmember Fay.
Okay, I just wanted to know, under these extraordinary circumstances, it's all actual physical condition of the building, of the structure. Is there anything that would go toward any kind of social significance? If it was a building that had a lot of, if we were going to historically preserve the city hall, would there be any reason why the social situation would be an extraordinary circumstance?
So I don't know that it would in this case, just because this is the history report is pretty typical. And again, our museum typically provides the majority of that history and social history that feed into these reports. This is really about the structural assessment itself. So I think that would really influence the cost more than the social history aspects of it.
Thank you. So I do appreciate the board having the suggestion, bringing it to us. I actually really like the pro tem's idea, if that is possible. The question I have is, if somebody were to wanted to landmark, must they go through this program first, or is this strictly if they want to make changes to the property?
Right, yeah, so in 2019, we did change it so that we required this before you landmarked. It doesn't, but it could be waived. And we've actually had those circumstances where someone comes to the commission and they're like, we're gonna landmark this no matter what. And they can waive that on their recommendation. I think that's a low barrier. Okay. But for many properties, we think this is a benefit and would like people to do this before they come forward. Again, just so they know what they're getting into and they know what is needed to maintain the property. There's usually some restoration and rehabilitation. So having an architect and other experts say, this is what it takes to historically rehabilitate or preserve those important parts of the property also is important.
Because people understand, I guess, that they don't have to restore necessarily the whole home to have that. They could restore like the front facade to maintain that. Isn't that part of it, or
there's
no?
Really isn't necessarily a requirement to preserve or restore parts of the property. However, having original components of the property is really important to the architectural integrity to qualify for landmarking. So it is often a point of, like, every landmark application is unique, but it's often a point of discussion with staff and the Historic Preservation Commission as they're going through the process is, are you restoring? What are you restoring it to? Are you taking it back to a period of historical significance and so forth? So there is a lot of discussion usually before it gets to City Council about what are they doing, and if the facade's been completely changed from 50 years or older, whatever you determine that point is, that is a significant period, it may not be worthy of landmarking. So some people will make those updates in order to qualify for landmarking.
Okay. I do appreciate the increase because it seems like with the the increased requirement to actually have an architect that's specific to historic preservation rather than letting other people do the assessment, as you mentioned, homeowners will need the additional funds in order to even make it happen. Are you currently, do you know, seeing very many of these come in that cost people more than the 4,000?
I haven't looked at every invoice, but in looking in the last 2 years, I did see one. It was, I think it was more than 2 years ago. There's a commercial property on Main Street here that did, I think we had the $9,000 grant in place when it was done. It was probably done around 19 or 20, right after we increased it. And I think it was about $11,000 for that assessment. It was a big commercial property here. They probably could have qualified for up to the 15,000 under our updated standards.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Cooperman.
Thanks. Could you say a word about, how the new upper limits were decided on, and also whether the commission thought about, instead of just, increasing them this one time, like whether they thought about some kind of evolving increase?
We did talk a little bit about an inflationary increase, but ultimately we decided against it. We thought there'd be opportunity to come back and update it as needed. The numbers were arrived at in consultation with the local architects. Again, as you know, we have a small handful that do almost all of our historic preservation work. So these were discussed with them, and they felt like these were adequate numbers to fund for the foreseeable future. When I say that, I'm thinking this probably needs to be looked at every 2 to 4 years at least to make sure we're keeping up with costs.
Other questions? Okay, well, let's take public comment. Back to council. Any other discussion, questions, comments? Okay. Then can we get a motion?
I'll make a motion. Resolution 24 Series 2025, a resolution, or move to pass. The Resolution 24, 2025, a resolution updating historic structure assessment, grant amounts, and requirements for completion of historic structure assessments.
Prior to landmarking.
Prior to landmark.
Second.
Any comment? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes. Great. City Attorney's report.
I don't have a report tonight.
All right. Identification of future agenda items. And I want to slow us just for a few minutes to make sure that when we do this, that we're carefully considering anything that we want to add to the future agenda. Make sure if people have things to add that we talk about them as we should.
I have one item, and that's something that we discussed at a prior meeting, or had the opportunity to discuss, and that was whether or not we should do I can't find the paper now, do some kind of resolution, as this town of Superior did, and Boulder, opposing the pathway through to the Rocky Flats plants.
We can't talk about it, obviously, the
Right.
substance, but how do council members feel about putting that on a future agenda? I actually would be in favor of it, but go ahead. Are there others?
I'm not opposed to that, but it would be helpful maybe to have an update or memo. I feel like something's happened since we last discussed it to now. So before we slot it on the agenda, I think that memo might be helpful to inform that decision. Because usually when we put something on the agenda, it means something else has to move, and I'm just curious where that item stands as a whole.
I mean, that's not substantive, but just sort of how the process has played out.
Yeah, because my understanding is last time we talked about this, there might have been a meeting between then and now.
There was,
So,
yeah, and several more resolutions, I think, but.
right, so I think an update would be helpful to inform the decision about agenda and when, if we do put it on the agenda. Like, does it need to be sooner or later or whatnot?
Others, looks like I'm getting nods. Yes, Councilmember Cooperman.
I guess I would be curious about how much time staff feels like they would need to put towards this agenda item, or if we make it an agenda item. And I think that maybe the difficulty is, how much information council wants in making this consideration. I feel like that will drastically impact how much time staff needs to put into it.
That might be something to include in a memo. I think that's a good suggestion. Councilmember Hamilton, looks like we're all, we're not making any motions or anything, but it's good to know. Any other item that people would like to put on for future? Sounds like not. All right, if we might have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nah.
All right. Thank you all.
Recording stopped.